Moving on for now, after the Taliban called for President Ashraf Ghani's removal and insisted that there will not be peace in Afghanistan until there is a new negotiated government, the United States has called on the terror group to engage in serious negotiations. This as US President Joe Biden continues to support the leadership of the Afghan people, including Ashraf Ghani. The Taliban have swiftly captured territory in recent weeks and are threatening a number of provincial capitals. A day after Taliban spokesman Suhail Shaheen laid out the terrorist group's stance on what should come next in Afghanistan, the US has called on the Taliban to engage in serious negotiations to determine a political roadmap for Afghan future.
The Taliban must go beyond issuing statements denying territorial offenses and targeted attacks. If this is truly not Taliban policy, their leadership should condemn these atrocities and violations of basic rights. They must proactively prevent their forces from carrying out these actions on the ground. We continue to call for an immediate end to ongoing violence, which is largely driven by the Taliban. We call on the Taliban to engage in serious negotiations to determine a political roadmap for Afghanistan's future that leads to a just and durable settlement. A negotiated settlement between the Islamic Republic and the Taliban is the only way to end 40 years of war and bring Afghans the peace that they seek and deserve. The world will not accept the imposition by force of a government in Afghanistan. Legitimacy and assistance for any Afghan government can only be possible if that government has a basic respect for human rights.
Meanwhile, in conversation with his Afghan counterpart Ashraf Ghani, the US president affirmed continued military support to Kabul. Afghan lawmakers have asked the US to finalize assistance ahead of a troop withdrawal. The lawmakers have voiced alarm that their air force was depleted in the face of a Taliban offensive. An Afghan delegation has also appealed for quick action on aircraft maintenance and munition supplies as the US prepares to end military presence by the end of next month. Negotiations are underway in the US Congress for prioritizing spending for Afghanistan in the 2022 defense budget. The request to the Congress including $3.3 billion in military aid for Afghanistan. Out of this, $1 billion intended for supporting Afghanistan's Air Force and other missions. Another $1 billion intended for the purchase and delivery of key supplies such as fuel, ammunition and spare parts, while $700 million will go towards Afghan soldiers' salaries. Washington has invested more than $8 billion in developing Afghanistan's Air Force. The US has authorized $100 million to address migration emergencies in Afghanistan. The funds will support those applying to the State Department program of special immigrant visas. Some 20,000 Afghans who worked as interpreters have applied for evacuation. In the face of rising Taliban control, Afghanistan's National Security Advisor and State Minister for Peace called on former Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif in London. The two sides discussed regional security and stability and agreed policy of mutual respect and non-interference in each other's internal affairs would benefit both sides. The Afghan government has repeatedly accused Pakistan of supporting the Taliban and preventing the Afghan forces from carrying out military operations against them. The ties between the two sides have further worsened since the daughter of the Afghan ambassador to Pakistan was briefly kidnapped in Islamabad on the 16th of July. Therefore, and thereafter, Kabul recalled its ambassador from Islamabad, demanding punishment for those responsible. In a tit-for-tat response, China has imposed sanctions on 7 US citizens and organizations after the United States sanctioned several Chinese officials in Hong Kong. These counter-sanctions coming days before the US Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman is due to visit China. The trip aims to address the worsening ties between the two sides and is the highest level visit an official has made under President Joe Biden. Last week, America had warned its business community of the growing risks of operating in Hong Kong, particularly from the imposition of the draconian security law enacted a year ago. China reacted to the warning, saying the move was designed to groundlessly smear Hong Kong's business environment and violated international law and basic norms governing international ties. In response, China has now imposed sanctions on 7 American individuals and entities, including Wilbur Ross, the Commerce Secretary under former President Donald Trump. China's statement did not give out details about what form the sanctions would take. The White House has said that the U.S. was undeterred by the sanctions.
As you know, going through the process, how people come into it?
In terms of the sanctions, we are aware, of course, of the reports that the PRC has imposed sanctions on several individuals and NGOs, including at least one official from the previous administration. We're undeterred by these actions when we remain fully committed to implementing all relevant U.S. sanctions authorities. These actions are the latest examples of how Beijing punishes private citizens, companies, and civil society organizations as a way to send political signals and further illustrate the PRC's deteriorating investment climate and rising political risk.
These sanctions come after tensions between Beijing and Washington have soured on a number of fronts, including human rights, trade, cybersecurity, and the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic. The U.S. Defense Department has singled out a Chinese manufacturer, Dajiang Innovations, saying that it poses potential threats to U.S. national security. Last month, a U.S. media report had said that a Pentagon audit had found 2 drones built by the DJI for U.S. government use, had no malicious code or intent, and were recommended for use by government entities. But now the Defense Department has clarified that the report was inaccurate and the release of the information was unauthorized. The Defense Department further said that in 2018, the U.S. government had issued a ban on the purchase and use of all commercial off-the-shelf drones, regardless of who manufactured it, due to cybersecurity concerns. It also said that the Defense Department would only purchase Chinese-made drones if it was conduction, counter-drone surrogate testing and training, and information warfare operations, testing, analysis, and training. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.